Are you a nervous flyer, anxious flyer, or just hate flying in general? Believe me, I was there, I get it. In this video, I'm going to share with you my 8 steps on how I overcame my flying anxiety. How I went from being so nervous to step foot into an airport to, well, doing this. So stick around and I will share my tips with you so you can maybe not go skydiving, but you can certainly get on an airplane with more confidence and a lot more ease. Hi, my name is Katie and welcome to Katie Does Travel. I am a solo female backpacker who's been traveling solo since I was 18 years old, and I am here to show that solo travel can be fun and meaningful even if you're an introvert like myself. In today's video, I am going to discuss how I overcame my flying anxiety. I think it's important to know that so many people suffer from flying anxiety, nervousness, and just dread getting on any sort of commercial air flight. But it took a lot of time, but I was finally able to get it to a point where it is super manageable and I can get onto an airplane with relative ease. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm 100% no fear flyer. I don't think that's ever gonna happen. I went from pretty anxious, pretty high up here down to about here, which I think is important, and it did take me a lot of years to get to that point. But it has allowed me to expand my reach of places that I can visit in this beautiful world of ours. Before we get started, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. It is free, and I post new solo travel content at least once a week, sometimes even twice a week if I'm feeling ambitious. But I have new videos every week revolving around solo travel content, and I have a lot of videos specifically geared towards introverts because, let's face it, a lot of travelers are extroverted, and for us introverts, it can be a little intimidating. But without further ado, let's get into the video. I think it's important before we really get into the meat of the video to just say that flying anxiety and just anxiety in general is very specific to the individual, and there's no right or wrong way to cope through anxiety. In my tips here, I personally don't use any sort of medication or having a drink or two at the airport bar to cope with my flying anxiety. If you do that, hopefully not together, but if you do that, no shade, no judgment. I support you in your journey, and I am so happy that you are finding something that works for you. So if you find that those methods work for you, definitely, I'm so happy for you first off, and keep doing that. But these are just tips for people who may or may not want to go on medication or have a drink or two. So just keep that in mind, but you do you, boo, and I'm so happy you have found something that works for you. Okay, so actually before I get into my tips, I wanted to share just very briefly my flying anxiety story. So I wasn't always a nervous or anxious flyer. It really started in like 2015, 2016 is when my nervousness and anxiety revolving around flying really kind of, I would say, hit its peak. I was always like a little bit nervous, but I could get on a flight just fine. But in 2016, I got a job where I was actually a remote worker, but I had to fly out to California a few times a year for our brand conferences, and so we would see each other. So at that point, I had to fly from Washington, D.C., where I was living, all the way over to LA, Santa Barbara, to go to these work events. And I also had other travel. Sometimes I go up to Boston or New York, although I would take the train to New York now that I think of it. But the point is, I would fly a lot. And in 2016, I remember I had first started the job, and it was actually my training. So I come back from California, and then I went up to Ohio for on-the-job training and shadowing with another rep who was in the same job as me, just in a different territory. And I ended up actually having to fly back early because we were supposed to get feet and feet and feet of snow in the DC area, and I didn't want to be stranded in Ohio for days and days. So I actually flew back early, but on that flight, we hit a lot of turbulence. It was probably the worst turbulence I've ever been in because we were going through this snowstorm. So it was very, very bumpy, it was the only time really, or very few times I've ever seen flight attendants actually not be nervous, but show a little bit of concern in their face. But yeah, so from there, I would say there was a few years where it was definitely really, really bad. But back in 2018, when I decided I wanted to travel a bit more extensively, that's when I was like, okay, I gotta get my flying anxiety under control. And these tips have definitely helped. So I want to share them with you in hopes that they can help you. So let's now actually get to the tips. So tip number one is probably the most important, but it is really be honest with yourself and identify why you have anxiety around flying. Is it because you have a fear of turbulence? Are airports too loud and overstimulating? Is it a lack of control? Is it the fear of heights? Is it just the fear of the unknown? All these concerns are super valid, and there's probably others, but really you just have to sit down and identify what is your trigger or triggers. And I don't like using the word triggers, but I think it applies here. So you have to find, why are you anxious? This can be a really uncomfortable thing just to sit down and think about, but it is so important because it really is key to figuring out why you have anxiety. So I know for me personally, kind of boils down to a couple of things. The first thing, the main thing, is honestly just the lack of control. I don't know how to fly an airplane, and I don't have control. I just have to put all my trust into these pilots, which I do trust them, but it's not like a car where I know how to drive a car and I can trust myself. With an airplane, I can't trust myself because I don't know how to fly it. So that's a big thing. It's just giving up control is sometimes a very difficult thing for me. I've gotten a lot better over the years, but it is definitely a difficult thing. And also for me, a big fear, and maybe this is just given my age, it's just something bad happening. There are certain precautions that have made air travel so much safer, and I just have to put my trust into that those protocols are there and they're being implemented, and we are safer as a society to travel. So those are my biggest things, but you definitely have to sit down and think about what is my big trigger or triggers that cause me to have a lot of flying anxiety. Once you know that, then you can move to step two. So number two is just learn how planes work. I think this goes for anyone who has flying anxiety, but just knowing how a plane works really helps me. And I kind of knew this before, but I've definitely gotten better at learning how planes work. And I'm not saying you have to go and learn the Airbus 320 or Boeing 7, what are we on, the 730, whatever. You don't have to learn those specific airplane models, just learn the basics that in turbulence, the wings are supposed to bend a little bit because you don't want a rigid structure. I actually know this because my dad's a structural engineer, but buildings, if you're in a tall building, and it's a windy day or you're high up, you might feel the building swaying a little bit, and that's because you want it to have some give. You don't want it to be so stiff that there's no give in the building. Same thing with airplanes. You don't want it to be so stiff that when it's going through turbulence, it's just this stiff board. You want some give. So that looked kind of silly, but you just want to understand how an airplane works. Another thing, this was actually suggested to me very recently in the past few days, is to maybe download a flight simulator and just kind of understand how the pilots and the co-pilots and everyone, how the plane is actually flying. I think it's important just to educate yourself. Don't over-educate yourself because then you're going to overthink it, but just know enough that you're okay, I understand how this plane works and I'm okay. So definitely something to implement into getting over your fear of flying. Number three is to establish a routine. Now, I don't want you to be compulsive with this or anything, but I think it's important to establish some sort of routine that you look forward to or you go through when you're flying, especially in the beginning stages of trying to overcome your anxiety. So this could be anything from working out before your flight, having a specific outfit you like to wear flying, having special snacks, or even a special playlist that you listen to when you fly. For me personally, so I used to have a specific outfit I would fly in, but I've kind of gone away from that just because I didn't want to bring that specific outfit on every trip. But, you know, I do wear leggings. That's kind of, I guess, my thing that stays common. But I did that for many years, having a specific outfit. Now I don't need it. But what I do have is I have 2 necklaces that I wear on the flight. One for like outbound, one for departure, one for arrival. But there are 2 necklaces. One my dad gave me, one my mom gave me. They're nothing like crazy fancy or anything, but they're meaningful to me. And it just makes me feel like I have like my parents with me. It also honestly gives me something to fidget with if I need to. But that's kind of my routine. I also have a Spotify playlist that I listen to specifically on takeoff, because that's still the scariest or most nerve-wracking part of flying for me. But I'll listen to that specific Spotify playlist. I've had it for many years. And I will listen to that on takeoff, and it makes me calm. Another thing I like to do is I like to try to fit in a workout before I fly, whether it's a run, getting on the bike, whatever. I do just like to try to work out because it gives me something else to focus on other than the flight itself. But you find what works for you and you do that. And I think over time, you might have this big routine, but think maybe over time you might be able to parse it down. I know personally over the years I've been able to parse it down, but the playlist, having the necklaces, and working out are 3 things that I still really try to do for every flight because it really helps me, and just having a routine before I fly. Number 4 is to watch flight attendant or pilot vlogs or TikToks. So when I started my journey, if you will, of trying to make my flying anxiety better, I watched a lot of YouTube channels. TikTok really wasn't it wasn't a thing. So I watched a lot of flight attendant YouTubers that really just helped me, I think humanize is the wrong word, but just try to make flying a bit more routine. So one of my favorite flight attendants, I don't believe she actually is currently vlogging, but my favorite flight attendant to watch was Jenny Ernst. I will link her channel down below. I think what helped is that she's around the same age as me, and I felt like I could relate to her in a lot of ways. But watching flight attendant and pilot vlogs or TikToks, again, just helps to make it a little bit more routine. That these are people who literally get in a plane multiple times a day, and this is their job. So it just helped me realize, okay, that's not a job I could do, but it's a job that other people do, and it's just as routine as going to the office. So I definitely recommend that. Like I said, I will link Jenny's channel down below. Even though she's not currently vlogging, she has many vlogs. I want to say she was honestly like the OG flight attendant vlogger, but definitely watch her videos. I'll link some other pilots and flight attendants, their channels down below, and you can also search on TikTok. There's many. They pop up in my feed, my For You page every so often, so definitely recommend that, because I would say probably out of all these steps, this is what really helped me in the beginning, so I really think it's going to help you. Number 5 is think about ways to remove your triggers. So going back to step 1, we talked about identifying your triggers on why you are nervous to fly. So now it's like, okay, think of ways, actionable ways to remove those triggers. So if you get nervous about security, maybe either get to the airport extra early or consider enrolling in some of these trusted flyer programs like PreCheck and Clear Plus. That helps you get through security a lot quicker. If you're nervous about turbulence, learn about turbulence, learn about how it happens and why it happens. And also try, if you can, to seat yourself on the plane either over the wings or towards the front of the plane, because those are going to be the less bouncy areas of the plane, versus if you're in the back, you're going to be moving a bit more. So it's just something, a way to potentially reduce the amount of stress when you're in the air. If you're nervous about boarding, see if you can board earlier, upgrade your boarding group, pay for a seat that allows early boarding. That's just another option. Not all airlines will allow that, but it is something to definitely look into. If you hate the noise in an airport or on the airplane, personally I do, I find them very overstimulating, invest in a good pair of noise canceling headphones. I did this year, or I got it for Christmas, but it really helped me out. I cannot tell you how much it helped me, especially in airports. Just, I get so overstimulated in an airport just with all the announcements. But having noise canceling headphones has really helped, and I wish I had invested in them earlier. If you're worried about flying all day, try to book an early morning flight. It sucks to get up that early sometimes, but you can get on your plane and then move on with your day. This is something I definitely used to do. I would try to book one of the first flights out in the morning, maybe not like the 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., but I would try to book a flight in the morning. Now it's not so much of an issue. I don't worry about flying all day. So honestly, some international flights you have to depart in the evening anyway, so there's no choice. But definitely, if you have the option and you are nervous about that, fly in the morning and you'll get to your destination sooner. You can enjoy your trip sooner. If you're just nervous in general, maybe mention it to a flight attendant when you board. They might check up on you maybe a few times during the flight. I'm not going to guarantee that, and I'm not a flight attendant, but I personally never done this, but I've actually was seated on a flight a few years ago with someone who was nervous. I think this was actually in 2021. It was my first flight post-COVID, and the person next to me was a nervous flyer and had actually mentioned something to the flight attendant earlier when they boarded. They told me this later. I noticed that the flight attendant actually came and checked up on them once during the flight. It was a short flight, and just made sure that they're okay. So it's definitely something to do, and that might help a bit, just to know that someone is aware of a situation and can certainly just check in, make sure you're okay. Number 6. This kind of goes with the previous tip, but it's to sign up for TSA PreCheck, Global Entry, or Clear Plus. Guys, this is a game changer. I know so many people do this these days, but also so many people don't. But if you are a nervous flyer at all, even if it's not security related, enroll in one of these programs. I am a huge advocate of it. So I first enrolled in TSA PreCheck back in 2016, 17, somewhere like that. And because I was at the time, I was living in DC, and DCA is a really busy airport, especially in the mornings. And when I would fly for work, I would typically be flying in the mornings. And it was just nice just to bypass that security line. I got PreCheck. It's valid for 5 years. PreCheck is actually currently now $78 for 5 years. It used to be a little bit more, but they've reduced the price, but it's definitely very, very handy to have. It gets you through security a lot quicker, saves you time and stress, and it's available at most US airports. Also, what I personally recommend, if you are going to be flying internationally, even just like once a year, I would suggest doing Global Entry. This is what I have now. I got this last year, and Global Entry, essentially, it's a little bit more. It's $100, but still valid for 5 years. You still get the PreCheck benefit, but Global Entry also gives you expedited access back into the US when you're traveling from abroad. So basically, you have to apply to these programs, and you do have to give them a lot of information, but at this point, the government is watching us a lot anyway, so they probably already know all this information. But essentially, when you are coming back into the US, you can go up to these designated Global Entry lanes, they take your photo, and you go. Like, that's it. It's super simple, super easy, and I highly recommend it. Another thing is Clear Plus. I'm personally not a member of this. I don't know a ton about Clear. It's $189 a year for membership. You do have to renew it every year, but I see them quicker than TSA PreCheck. I've seen people, they scan their eyes and then they go to the front of the PreCheck line. So it's another program. I know with a lot of credit cards, they do offer a one-time, or I guess every 5 years, for TSA PreCheck and Global Entry, they offer like a credit towards that you can use. I know some airlines offer discounts for Clear Plus. I believe Delta is one of them, but definitely check if you're interested in any of these programs. Check to see if there's any discounts or if your credit card offers anything. I'm not an expert in this, so don't ask me, but definitely recommend enrolling in one of those programs. It's going to just save you so much time. I now mostly fly out of Orlando, and that PreCheck line is a godsend, because if you've ever flown in or out, if you've ever flown out of Orlando, you know the security line can be awful. So definitely my PreCheck, Global Entry, membership has paid dividends in the long run, so I highly recommend it. Number 7 is to read the turbulence forecast. Now, this is if you're specifically nervous about turbulence, and while I don't get super nervous about turbulence anymore, I still like to check this. But if you go to turbulenceforecast.com, this is not sponsored, by the way, although if they want to do sponsorship, like, hit me up. But turbulenceforecast.com has maps for all over the world for pilot reported turbulence. Yeah, for pilot reported turbulence. So I use this a lot on my domestic flight. So if I'm flying, let's say from Orlando to Washington, DC, I go onto a site like FlightAware or Flight Radar just to see what the track has been, like the flight path for the past few days of that flight. And then I will, maybe like 2 hours before the flight, I'll pop on the turbulenceforecast.com and I'll read the map kind of approximately for my route just to see if there's going to be any possibility of turbulence. Now, this could be maybe cause more anxiety for you, but for me personally, it's nice to know, okay, hey, we're gonna be hugging the South Carolina coast and there's some turbulence being reported at 36,000 feet. So it just helps me be aware of it. We might not hit that turbulence, and we might hit that turbulence, but it's just good for me to be aware. You do have to learn how to read these maps. It's not that difficult. They actually give you a guide on how to read these on the website, but it takes like 5 minutes to learn. Like, it's super easy, but they definitely help. So definitely check out turbulenceforecast.com. I will leave the link in the description below as well, but it definitely helped me out, and I have the website bookmarked on my phone for any future flights. And number 8 is to just get excited about your flight. I know this sounds weird, and for someone who has such bad flying anxiety, this was something that took me a long time to get to the point, but just, I don't know, just getting to that mindset, like, okay, I get to fly. This is going to be a joyful experience. So, you know, look up to see what the in-flight entertainment options are. Get excited to watch a movie or a TV show, or download your own and put it on your iPad or your phone or whatever. See what snacks are being offered. If there's a particular snack, like if you're flying Delta, they have those Biscoff cookies. Like, I get so excited to fly Delta because I know I'm going to get those cookies. And if I don't, I will just ask for one. It's going to make you feel more excited for the flight, and you're not going to feel as like dreading the flight or dreadful about the flight. So just definitely try to get excited. This may take a little bit of time to get used to or to get to this point, but I definitely recommend, if you can, just get a little bit excited about it. It's fun. Flying is fun. It's stressful, but it also leads to a great trip, or you're coming back from a great trip. So that's it. Those are my 8 tips on how you can overcome your flying anxiety. I hope these tips help you out, and I hope that they make you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident when you get onto your next flight. If you have your own tips, I would love to hear them. Please leave them down in the comments below. I'm sure they're going to help me and other flyers with our flying anxieties, so definitely share them below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to this channel. I post new content at least once a week, if not twice a week, if I'm feeling super ambitious. But definitely subscribe. I would love to have you here as part of the family. If you want to follow me on my other social media channels, they are here on the screen. That's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to wander far and wander often. Bye!